Hello and welcome, Exiles. Today I want to talk about the Tota event and what I'm planning to start and what things are very powerful being added back into the game. So, specifically, Tota, if you weren't there, Trial of the Ancestors, that's where we got the tattoos we have today. The tattoos we have today, though, are actually a significantly nerfed version of the tattoos we had in Tota League. And the Tota tattoos we had, the unnerfed, very powerful tattoos, they're actually pretty much all coming back. If you go through this list, and you compare it with the list of tattoos on the wiki of the legacy tattoos, most of the good ones are there. The max charge tattoos, the plus gem level tattoos, onslaught on hit, those like 30 attribute big notable tattoos are there. And then some more key ones, like the ones that let you to trigger one of the random Tota unique mobs that could give you a benefit or a buff. One of my personal favorites is the Rockiata one, which gives you a permanent action speed one step ahead buff. Is very, very nice. And then some more significant power creep ones, and specifically, I think the builds that benefited the most from this tattoo system is actually additional projectile tattoos. I want to specifically highlight this because it's what I'm planning to build around, and I think if anyone's interested in building a projectile build, it's a nice refresher. I think most of you know where this is going. Of course talking about using Warrior's Tail in combination with the Ramako's Makanga tattoo. Specifically, in this location here outside of the Ranger. Why in this location? You'll notice I don't have one, two, I actually have three locations that work for this. Now, this tattoo has a very specific condition. It says requires 7 adjacent allocated passives. Now, the hard part is finding A, spots that have 7 passives that are connected from one node, and B, having that be near a jewel socket. This, as far as I'm aware, is the highest amount you can get within the radius of Warrior's Tail. It's 3 of them. Some locations can get 2. For example, Warrior's Tail here, I think 2, this notable, and this notable can meet the 7 attached notable requirement. But anyways, right here, you will see I have one additional projectile here, and then it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nodes connected to it. And when it's in Warrior's Tail, it doesn't just give one additional projectile, it gives 2. And then I have the same thing here and here as well. So this is a location that can give you 6 additional projectiles. And the thing is, for many builds that want projectiles, a lot of these nodes connected are good. You're not doing much waste. That's the other benefit. The biggest opportunity cost to this is you're giving up your cluster jewel socket. Clusters are very powerful. You normally want a cluster here, but I think this is one of the cases where it's worth giving up a cluster. The other thing is you might be grabbing a keystone like Perfect Agony, which you may notice if you're playing a crit build, this is not good for you. It has issues. However, with tattoos giving you the ability to re-roll a keystone, you can re-roll this keystone into a keystone that is more beneficial. And as well as here, you need to grab this keystone to hit the 7 node requirement. You can have this within a timeless jewel, which this is already the ideal timeless jewel slot on this side of the tree. And you can re-roll it to a keystone that is either not prohibitive to your build or beneficial. So a lot of this situation where you're grabbing some nodes, you might be forced into grabbing a point that isn't good for your build. You can re-roll it to a keystone that is, or you can just make it something that is not going to be detrimental at the same time of using something you already want anyways. Another really cool part about this is most of the nodes are good wheels anyways. For example, this accuracy wheel is halfway decent anyways if you're playing a crit build. If you're playing a mark build, this mark wheel is already good. Life wheel, already a decent wheel. Leech wheel, already a decent wheel. In terms of like this type of pathing, there's only like you're only losing a little bit of value in terms of like maybe you have to grab a one pointer here and there, but for 6 projectiles, it's kind of crazy. So that's the highlight number one. Number two is what build am I even planning to play with a build with a bunch of projectiles like this? I actually kind of want to play an Oshabi, and I was thinking tornado shot. I don't play bow builds too much, but when I did play bow builds back in Settlers League, I played a trickster character, which I ended up playing Tornado Shot with. I actually really liked the skill, and it was a lot of fun. So late game, I think Tornado Shot would feel really good with this amount of projectiles. Early game, we'll probably play something else. I need to do some testing with my league start. But the general concept I'm going to go for here is I want to build around Oshabi's forest tracking. And how do I specifically want to do that? I want to use the Foulborn item known as the Perfect Form. This is actually kind of one of the craziest evasion stacking items in the game, which it combines another thing I really like, which is scaling life. And it says, hey, for every 10 life, I'll give you 8 evasion. And of course, you can volatile val this to be up to 10. So let's say you have a 10,000 life character. This chess piece is giving you 10,000 flat evasion. Now you can see where I'm going with this. Forest tracking on Oshabi says, hey, here's a bunch of percent damage based on how much evasion you have. And obviously, if we get a bunch of life, we have a bunch of evasion, we can scale that, we get a bunch of percent damage. That solves our percent damage. Now, when you're making a character, you need to solve more than your percent damage. You need to solve a few other things. The other things you need to solve are stuff like your attack speed, your flat damage, your crit, things like that you need to solve as well for damage. And we have some answers for that. And I hate that this is the answer, but I think it's the correct answer. And I think you all know where I'm going with this. I'm already looking at wanting to get some life scaling. I think end game, it probably just has to be Replica Bronze. This item is just busted for flat. I don't think there's many ways to get better flat. And part of the reason I'm looking at this item is because it pairs so well with the fact we want life to get evasion, and I want to really maximize that synergy. And using Replica Bronze combined with Widow Hail, if you have a quiver that has a bunch of strength, a bunch of life, you're getting a lot of nice pairing for A, scaling your life, which then scales your evasion, but then also for B, giving you a bunch of that flat damage. The other thing about that's cool about Widow Hail is if I have a Widow Hail with a bunch of increased quiver effect, you can have +1 arrow on the quiver, and you can combine that with the 6 proj. Okay, I closed out too many things here. I meant to go to the tree here. If, for example, we have 6 proj on our tree and we have +1 arrow on the quiver, that's going to end up giving us 3 from Widow Hail, 4 if you get a really good volatile vowed one. And we're already at like 9 additional projectiles. You can get 10 additional projectiles, 11 additional projectiles. What I think is hilarious is a character firing 13 arrows for tornado shot without even using GMP. That just sounds hilarious to me. And honestly, I think it would work really, really well. So yeah, that's some of the thoughts I have going into this. Thinking about the nice synergy of Widow Hail, Perfect Form, and the Replica Albrons. I thought about the other possibility of maybe getting flat from the flat damage per frenzy mod, which you can get on rings and then try to scale some frenzies. I think that could work okay, but ultimately I think it's just going to be a lot less flat than Replica Albrons. I may end up experimenting with other things, but that's where I think end game, I think this is where this goes. Now, that leads me to another talking point, which is initially, I think the shrine stuff will feel pretty good in maps, but ultimately, I like a character that's not just good in maps, but also good in boss fights and good in all scenarios. And I think late game on this character, there is a solution where we get just a perfectly feels good, consistent power level, no matter what the content is. And I think it's a scenario where you reroll woodland shrines into either, and I think there's a lot of good options, honestly, with the new tattoos that they allow to reroll ascendancy points, which is these tattoos, the tattoos for each specific class. And specifically, I want to highlight a few ones that are really, really strong. So I don't have the 328 tree out, but if I did, if you looked at Juggernaut, there'd be a node called Undeniable, which gives a bunch of flat accuracy based on your strength. And then it gives you attack speed based on how much accuracy you have. This one is particularly interesting for okay, I'm just going to do the click convert to 328 so I can show you what I'm talking about. But I think this is a very neat combination, which is this node right here, Undeniable right here, 500 accuracy based on your or attack speed based on your accuracy, and then gain accuracy equal to twice your strength. This node normally you cannot combine with the Deadeye node over here, which is Avity, 5% more accuracy per frenzy. But technically, as an Oshabi character, I could Forbidden Flesh and Flame Avity, and I could reroll the tattoo for Undeniable. And then I could stack some frenzy charges where I have a more multiplier on my accuracy and thus scale the accuracy to the moon. So that's kind of one of the cool combinations that we can get with these new tattoos. And one of the ones I'm considering. Another one I'm considering is combining something like the Avity tattoo, but instead of going for Undeniable for the insane attack speed, we could actually go for something like the Slayer's Masterful Form, stack a bunch of frenzies, and then have a bunch of endurance charges, which makes us very tanky, a lot of DR. There's some really nice fun combinations. You can get Fortify from Champion and then have Fortify on a bow character. There's some cool stuff like that I think has a lot of nice pairings that I'm interested in considering. So that's kind of some of the thought process. Another thought process is, I didn't talk about it earlier, but the node right here, Oath of Magi, since we're not actually using the double defense body armor, which is one of the ways I normally use this if I'm trying to stack evasion, because the double body armor only applies to the base evasion of perfect form, which would only be like 1,000 base when we're getting so much from our life. So it doesn't matter as much. This gives us back some sockets, and it makes us more able to take advantage of the other nodes here, which are giving 80 all res or 40% life or 30% movement speed. These are really, really nice benefits, and it requires you to give up 4. I'm probably going to give up 8 sockets in order to get 2 of these 3 benefits, which would pair amazingly with potentially the Bloodline Ascendancy right over here, Precursor's Release, which could give us crit immune, stun immune, action speed immune. Some of the things I'm considering is this node right here. But honestly, at the same time, I could also see myself just keeping Innate Blessing for the rotating shrine buffs every 8 seconds. Could give us up to like 3 permanent shrine buffs with just a warp tattoo, because the shrine buffs last 20 seconds. And so a warp tattoo would make them last like 30 seconds or close, a little bit under. So I think it would be like 3 permanent buffs. So that might be worth keeping in its own right. You get the idea. There's stuff I'm looking at here. I think the combination or the synergy there is pretty fun. Ultimately, I haven't played a bow character in a really long time, and I don't know how else to say this. This combination, these additional proj with Warrior's Tale, Tota was far and away very much a bow or projectile build paradise just because of this one combination. It elevated those types of builds far beyond most other builds in the game, just in terms of like they benefited more heavily than other builds did, if that makes sense. Another thing I want to say real quickly is part of the other reason I'm considering this sort of defensive kit where a character has a bunch of evasion and I'm considering using perfect form has to do with Tota, the mechanic itself. Acrobatics, you lose suppress and you get back spell dodge. I'm scaling a bunch of evasion. What does that help me do? That helps me avoid things. Why do I want to do that? If you don't remember, I'm going to remind you guys because it's a very strong memory in my mind, which you'll notice is a drawing. This drawing represents the Tota mechanic. Now, Tota mechanic has this thing where you have to channel the totem of the enemies to destroy their totem, and you have to destroy all the totems of the however many enemies are on the enemy team to win the match. The thing is, GGG, in their infinite wisdom, decided to make the mechanic say, if an enemy were to come up behind you with a hammer and bonk you, right? Hit you with the hammer. Instead of let's say having a character that's stun immune and say, it don't matter, or having a character with a bunch of defenses and say, that didn't hurt me that much, I'm going to keep channeling to destroy your totem. Instead, there is a guaranteed default, ridiculously long, like, I don't know, 1 to 2.5 second stun. It's a pretty long stun animation, and you can't get any immunity to it. So the only way to avoid that stun animation is having a character that has an avoidance layer. For example, evasion. If we stack a bunch of evasion, 95 evade chance, 1 out of 20 hits will give us this awkward, annoying stun. Or for example, spell dodge. If it's a spell hit, spell dodge will give us a chance to avoid it. These sorts of mechanics are heavily encouraged in Tota because of this obnoxious stun mechanic that occurs when you just get tapped. Even if it's a hit that would have done 1% of your total EHP pool or whatever, it still is going to give you that 2-second obnoxious stun. And so part of the reason I'm leaning towards a character with evasion and spell dodge is for avoiding that mechanic. Another thing I want to say is, yes, you can make a character that just does the Void Sphere, knockback, cheese, and that's probably going to be the best way to consistently chain win events and make a lot of currency in the Tota mechanic. Power to you for doing that. I personally am hopefully just trying to make a character that can actually fight the enemies and kill the enemies and, be able to do other mechanics besides just cheesing. But respect to you if you want to do that. That's not necessarily what I want. I just want a character that can do the mechanic decently well because it has this defensive layer, evasion, spell dodge that work well in the mechanic, but also have a character that hopefully does some damage and can chain clear maps and can enjoy Mirage and the rest of the game as well, not just being a one-trick pony for cheesing the mechanic. Yes, they did nerf the knockback stuff, but it still works very effective. If you didn't play Tota, or you played Tota and you thought they nerfed it, yes, they did nerf it, but it still just works. There's a few things that people needed to change for their cheese build with brands and stuff that I don't quite remember, but I remember very vividly that after the nerf, people were still just cheesing the mechanic. So that should still work for people that want to do that. Anyways, my character plan is going to be an Oshabi attack-based character to start. I might do, I don't know. I'm gonna look at different skills to league start, and then late game I want to shift towards doing a tornado shot, life stack, evasion stack, Oshabi. That's the plan. Anyways, that's just my League Start video for the event. I'm sure there's not going to be I don't think there's going to be too many other streamers playing this event from what I've heard, but I think there's like at least, I don't know, 10 or 15 maybe guys that are still logging into it. I was going to continue with PoE2, but this event just has a little bit too much spice for me to pass up. I'm a Path of Exile 1 addict after all, and getting back the power creep of tattoos and a little bit of new build making power through the forbidden tattoo ascendancy things, it just seems like a lot of fun to me. So anyways, hopefully you guys enjoy this video. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one, guys.